others, and that's why you're here. So thank you so much. Our Q&As will happen at the end of each segment, and at that point, we will invite you to raise your hand, and we will unmute you. And with that, I will introduce our conversational case management agenda. So today we're going to learn how to apply conversational case management to daily casework, learn the key principles of MI or motivational interviewing, and how these apply to housing problem-solving conversations. We will hear from Monisha Davis as well as Daryl Rogers, and I will let them both introduce themselves. I've talked enough, and I'll turn it over to Monisha. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your training.
Hey, guys. Hope everyone had an awesome 3-day weekend. I'm like, I can't see y'all, but I can feel your energy, so we're all here together. I feel like I know most of you. I am Monisha. I do the case conferencing for the veterans, families, singles, and shelter side. So I'm sure I have either been introduced to you at least once upon a time, or maybe you met me back when I was doing case management, which is what we're going to get into. And then I'll let Daryl, my partner in crime, introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. Seems like I'm having some technical difficulty. I can't access the camera yet again. My name is Daryl Rogers. I am a CLC board secretary. I'm a person with lived experience, most importantly, and I am also the housing problem solving trainer.
Well, here at SSF, we like to emphasize the use of conversational case management as well as housing problem solving and motivational interviewing. All are essential approaches to addressing homelessness because they foster client-centered, trauma-informed engagement. These techniques, will also help build trust, empower individuals to explore solutions, and encourage self-determination in a client's housing journey. So let's be honest, case management isn't just about paperwork and referrals. We all know it's also conversations, and not just any conversations, but the ones that build trust, uncover clients' needs, and empower clients to be able to move forward. Sounds simple? It's not. As we all know, it is one of the hardest skills to master. Some providers are able to pick it up naturally, while others struggle to find the right words, the right tone, and the right moments to push or pull back from a client. And let's not forget, every client is different, and what works for one may completely shut down another. So why does it matter? Because how we talk to clients can be the difference between them engaging in services or wanting to walk away. The right conversation at the right time can change a life. And today we are going to break down what makes great conversational case management work, why it's tough, and how we can all be better at it. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So the importance of conversational case management, this case management approach is especially critical in understanding a client's housing needs and getting deeper than what an assessment alone can accomplish. As we all know, many clients can answer assessment questions in a way that doesn't necessarily reflect their current situation. And I'm sure as people, we have all been there where we've been taking a test or something, and then we've gotten to a multiple choice question where we think, wow, none of these answers really fit or really express what I'm going through. So you just pick the one that best suits or best you feel will best explain what your situation is. But imagine when your life is on the line, or imagine when you're not in a place where you can think clearly. It's hard to figure out what answer to pick. So as caseworkers, we rely on assessments, but let's be real, they're not always as accurate as we would like. And it's not because clients are trying to be difficult. They may not fully understand the questions that are being asked, or they may not feel comfortable sharing with someone because they don't know you all that well yet, or they just don't trust the housing process yet because they've been let down so many times. So additionally, CAS assessors need to be skilled in listening and structuring housing plans that are responsive to a client's needs. With so few resources, it is critical that we explore alternative housing options, which can include exploring a household support system, friends and family, and understanding what programs, interventions have been useful in the past. All right, and then, oh, next slide, please. All right, so.
It's Ty. Sorry about that. 1 second. We're getting a lot of reports of some issues with the screen. Before we proceed, I wanted to see if there's a way that we can fix the screen so folks aren't missing out on the content you created.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, Ty, thank you. Majority of screens are blocked by blank black boxes.
Oh.
Wow. Ray blocks on the PowerPoint.
Oh.
Wow.
Trying to get fancy, Jody, and done messed us up.
No, there's no gray boxes on this. We're gonna, y'all, thank you for your feedback, and Ty, thanks for jumping in. This Zoom, we all had some challenges in our pre-training as well. So I would suggest perhaps, oh, they just pop up wherever. Wow. I'm sorry, I can't help you.
No.
Maybe I can stop share and share again. Let me try that. Thank you for, yeah, the laughing emojis. That's exactly how I'm feeling. Let me stop sharing and we'll try again. And now we get to see your beautiful faces. All right. All right, well, the slides are moving along.
They're off now.
They're off now. The gray boxes are off.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Now let's see if we can go back to our slides. Nope. All right, let's try it again. Fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks, Jody.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me know, Ty. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm like, y'all know during case conferencing, I don't like that chat box. Y'all better come off mute because I can't see. Okay. All right, we're going to dive back into it. Okay, so conversational case management is client-focused, collaborative approaches to case management that uses purposeful, trauma-informed conversation-style dialogue to explore and address the needs, goals, and challenges of individuals seeking support. It is a dynamic process that uses active listening, engaging with open-ended with open-ended not yes or no questions, asking thought-inspired questions, and guide discussions to empower clients to identify their personal strengths, set achievable goals, and develop solutions to overcome barriers. This method emphasizes building trust and rapport through open, non-judgmental communication. Next slide, please. Right. So let's get into motivational interviewing. So I like to call motivational interviewing. I think we went a little bit too far, but that's okay. I like to call it the art of guiding change. Have you ever wanted something for someone more than they seem to want it for themselves? Maybe a client who needs housing but won't fill out the application, or maybe someone who wants help but they keep missing appointments with you. That's where motivational interviewing comes in. It's not just about convincing people to change, but it's about helping them find their own resources and reasons to do it. Motivational interviewing is all about listening, guiding, and sparking that aha moment where a client takes the lead in their own progress. Today, we are going to break down what motivational interviewing is, why it works, and how to use it effectively. All right, now we can jump into the poll. Next slide. All right, so please answer the poll, y'all. I love it when y'all get involved. Rate on a scale of 1 to 5 the importance of knowing your paperwork.
So please bear with me. Zoom is zooming today.
We got 1% for no and 99% for yes. Uh-oh. Angelica, you can't hear? Oh, okay. All right, awesome. So it looks like everyone knows the importance of knowing your paperwork. All right, next slide, please. So what is motivational interviewing and why is it important? Well, for one, it gives control to the clients, providing them an opportunity to self-govern. It creates a connection with your client by creating brave spaces without judgment, and it gives dignity in an otherwise challenging moment of someone's life. And 4 guiding principles to using motivational interviewing is, of course, engaging. That's one of the most important ones. It builds trust and rapport through engagement, focus on working together to set goals, exploring to help them uncover their own reasons for change, and partner with them, not for them. Next slide. So skills to use. A strength-based approach is always wanted and welcomed. Through active listening, identify what has worked in their life or work history prior, supporting them to identify personal values and needs, empower autonomy, oh my goodness, autonomy with client-led decisions, guiding conversations with clients instead of directing, practicing empathy. Empathy equalizes sympathy, sympathy separates. And practice active listening and asking open-ended questions. And next slide, please. So some practical tips. Listen more and talk less. Always feel the need to give them the space to be heard. Know your paperwork and engage in the conversations. Use open-ended questions and affirm their strengths through active listening. Reflect what you hear in your own words so your client feels heard and seen. This also gives the client a moment to refine and see it from a different perspective. And the next slide, please. All right, so we are going to jump in to do a little active listening. Daryl, you want to explain?
Welcome to our guide.
Are we ready, Monisha?
And then Daryl, you want to jump in and explain the video? Oh, you're on mute, Daryl.
Sorry about that. Active listening video. My notes are not coming. Can I get the next screen, please?
So we're going to watch this video if that's what you're requesting.
Yes.
Yes.
Hey there! Welcome to our guide on mastering active listening for managers. Effective communication is key in today's fast-paced world, and active listening plays a huge role. So, let's dive in. Active listening isn't just about hearing words, it's about truly understanding the message. Imagine this. Have you ever had a conversation where someone nods along but seems totally disconnected? That's not active listening. Here are some key points to understand it better. Engagement. It's about being fully present in the moment, focusing not only on the words, but also on the tone, body language, and emotions behind them. Empathy. It involves putting yourself in the speaker's shoes, trying to grasp their perspective, feelings, and intentions. Response. It's not just about being quiet, it's about responding appropriately, showing that you've understood and validated what was said. Now, let's break down 7 essential techniques that managers can use to master active listening. Understanding the purpose of communication. Ever wondered why someone's telling you something? Understanding the underlying purpose helps you grasp the core message better. It's like deciphering the real why behind the what. Paying attention and really listening. We all have those moments when our mind wanders off mid-conversation, right? But active listening means giving your undivided attention, soaking in every word and responding thoughtfully. Being open to learning. Have you ever found yourself thinking, I already know this? But what if there's something new to learn, a fresh perspective to gain? Being open-minded fosters better understanding and collaboration. Being patient and avoiding interrupting. It's tempting to jump in with our thoughts or solutions, but patience is key. Let the speaker finish their train of thought before chiming in. Trust me, it makes a world of difference. Not taking ownership of the conversation. As managers, it's easy to slip into a mode of control, steering the conversation where we want it to go. But active listening means letting the speaker lead, respecting their autonomy, and not hijacking the dialogue. Offer genuine feedback after active listening. Ever felt like your words were lost in the void? Providing meaningful feedback shows that you've genuinely listened and valued what was said. It could be a simple reflection, summary, or follow-up action. Thank the person for their communication. Gratitude goes a long way. It's about acknowledging the effort and vulnerability it takes to open up. A sincere thank you can foster trust, respect, and deeper connections. So there you have it, folks. Active listening isn't just a skill, it's an art that can transform relationships, boost productivity, and drive success. By mastering these techniques, we can become better managers, communicators, and leaders. So, let's put them into practice and see the magic unfold with Risely's free active listening assessment.
Thank you.
Okay, got it. All right. So, how many of you were actively listening? And how many of the 7 techniques did you hear? We'll go ahead and get that poll back up. But I'm trying to be professional. The 14% who answered, were there really 7? There were. I'm like, I want names who chose that, because I'm like, I'm gonna have to have some one-on-one training with y'all. All right. All right, awesome. I see most of you though saw all 7. Love it. All right, Daryl, you want to take over this slide?
Sure. Okay, next slide, please. Body language role. Don't put the desk between you and the person. Make sure you have a private, quiet space. Be open. Check your body language. No judging. Why? I think you should. Lean towards, engage them, reinforce skills. Eye contact, acknowledge. Appropriate eye contact, follow their cues. Um, During housing problem solving, I know that we kind of switched the role language up, having to do with who you're interviewing and what their traumas might be. Some people might not want you to lean forward, um, or might not like people to get too close, or even eye contact. I think it's best to judge, and it all comes from listening and paying attention to your client, which will gauge your body language and/or role. Next slide, please. Right now, we're going to watch a video with regards to sympathy versus empathy and the difference between the two.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Let's talk about that video that we just watched. Who has ever been hit with an at least when they're struggling and they were trying to open up to someone? You know, you lost your job. Oh, well, at least you got work experience. Or I'm feeling so overwhelmed. Well, at least you got a roof over your head. We've all been there, right? Let's be honest. And saying at least, it never helps the situation at all. As Brene Brown just showed us in the video, true empathy isn't about fixing, comparing, or throwing out silver linings. It's about showing up and saying, I'm here, I hear you. So here's the challenge. Next time someone shares something tough with you, pause before responding. Instead of reaching for advice or a positive spin, just try this. That sounds really hard, and I'm here for you. Or tell me more. Or even just sitting with them in the silence, because sometimes just being the whole being in the hole with someone is more powerful than actually saying something. All right, next slide, please. Okay, and the next slides we're going to get into involve housing problem solving. Y'all, I don't know what's going on with my language today, but Daryl's going to take over for a little while, so hopefully I can gather myself. Go ahead, Daryl.
Housing problem solving. Next slide, please. The core principles to housing problem solving are person-centered, client-led, identify strengths in active listening, community as a support option, offer short-term options to divert homelessness, housing-centered conversation, and light touch assistance. Next slide, please. Housing problem steps is introductions, active and empathetic listening, exploring strengths, networks, and skills, short and or long-term housing options, next step, and follow-up. Next slide, please. Housing problem solving steps, introductions. Introducing yourself, letting the client know who you are, what you do, allowing them to introduce themselves. Next bullet, please. Active and empathetic listening. We just watched 2 videos with regard to that. Next bullet, please. Exploring strengths and networks and skills. Like to expound on the exploring strengths, networks, and skills. Given the opportunity after introductions and listening, a lot of times clients have, or people experiencing homelessness have used a lot of skills and have a lot of skills that they don't realize until they get a chance to get their story heard. Next slide, please. Or next bullet. Short and or long-term housing options, being realistic, pointing out what would be sustainable and most successful in housing instead of allowing the person to be put in a situation where they might be back in the experiencing homelessness again. Next slide, please. Next steps and follow-ups. Being a person with lived experience, following up is key. And taking that next step it gives a reassurance. So I think that's a very important part of this process. Next slide, please.
Hi, Daryl. It's me. I'm going to interrupt for a quick moment.
Yeah.
It's Jody for everyone else who's listening. Daryl, I think sometimes the housing problem solving is kind of a mystery on what this is. And I think it's really relevant to the conversation around, of course, the conversational case management and motivational interviewing. Is there a way that you can kind of give us an example of how motivational interviewing enables and allows a housing problem solving conversation to happen?
Sure. I can use myself an example. I like to use my story and as the experience that allowed me to just become successfully housed. One of the things that happened with me when I went in for services, I was full of trauma, like most people are that are experiencing homelessness. And the last thing that on this earth that I was going to do is trust anyone. But a young lady who use motivational skills very well. She asked me a very important thing, and it was a very simple thing. That one thing is, what is it that I like to do? Uh, having done a a lot of time in prison, I picked up the skill to I love to read. And that was one of the things that I would find myself doing while I was experiencing homelessness to escape the day or get away from the crowd. I would always lose myself in a book. And she asked me what was one of the things that I enjoyed doing. Um, and I told her reading. And she offered me a book. She offered me a book. And a lot of times I would go back to the service providers, not so much looking for help, but looking for another book to read. But me coming back and being consistent there in that space allowed me to get everything that I needed. I was able to get doc ready. I was able to uh, access psychiatric help. I was able to do a lot of things that fostered a healthy and a successful return to being successfully housed. So I think that just those simple cues in motivational conversation with regards to getting to know a person, building up that trust. I understand that we're in the housing system, the housing solving homelessness. But we're also in the business of people, and we're in the business of serving people that are full of trauma and that have been hurt and really don't know how to trust yet. So that was one of the big experiences that I personally uh, went through.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I've listened to you share your stories in housing problem solving for the last year. And I think that, our stories are kind of just that the crumbs of success, as they say it sometimes, success leaves a trail. So I'm curious if you can explain how um, this type of housing problem solving leads into exploring strengths, networks, and skills. And the other question, and I'm really curious if the folks on our call know what housing problem solving is.
Oh, I would go back to say first and foremost, building up that level of trust with someone. Um, I have the same um, coordinator that I've had for years. She's like an aunt to my children. You know what I mean? She allows me to be um, who I am and not who I had to be while experiencing homelessness, right? The progression from who I was while I was experiencing homelessness to who I am now uh, as a single father. You know, she went through the ups and downs with me without judgment. Um, just always guiding me to fall back on my soft and hard skills, if you will. So that's kind of how um, uh, you get, how I would relay the motivational, uh, interviewing. First, you have to get a person to trust you. I'm always go back. Uh, I'm always fall back to that. You got to get someone to trust you to open up and let you know what they're actually dealing with. So you'll know what barriers to break down to become, not just successfully housed, but uh, to begin to heal again. And housing problem solving is a training that we do quarterly. Our next housing problem solving training will be March. Can someone help me out on the dates here? 12th to 14th, something like that. It's a pretty good program. If there's anyone that hasn't been to one, I would suggest that there's a lot to offer there. There's a lot to gain.
Thank you, Daryl. Yes, March 12th to 14th. And unfortunately, the training is full. I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, but we do offer them quarterly in June, September, and November. Keep an eye on your email for that. Thank you so much for sharing and allowing me to ask some follow-up questions.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Daryl. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Great. Then next slide, Jody, please. So we'll dive into what are open-ended questions. So they are questions that cannot be answered with just a simple yes or no answer. We can learn so much when they just share, including how they feel or felt about it. Topics we are inviting people to discuss would be like, could you please tell me more? Can you share a time when, or what steps, or how do you feel? And it gives us the opportunity to express empathy. So what is the magic of open-ended questions? Well, it pretty much unlocks real conversations. So imagine you're talking to a client and you ask, do you need help? And they shrug, nah, I'm fine. Conversation's over. But were they really fine? Probably not. Now, what if you asked, what has been the hardest part of your situation lately? Suddenly that gives them a chance to pause, they can think, and then they can share. And that will unlock real conversation. That's the power of open-ended questions in case management. It takes us beyond just simple yes or no's and into real stories, real struggles, and strengths that our clients have. When we ask the right questions, we can help a client feel heard, understood, and most importantly, empowered to take action. Next slide, please, Jody. So here are some examples of some closed-ended to open-ended questions. So a closed-ended question would be, do you have a place to stay tonight? Of course, that's going to be just a simple yes or no. How you can ask that in an open-ended way would be, can you tell me about your current housing situation? That makes them have to dig a little bit deeper to explain. Another closed-ended question, do you have any friends or family who can help? That's so vague. Most clients are going to say, nope, I'm doing this all by myself. Whereas if you ask, who in your life has been supportive when you have faced challenges? Can't just say yes or no to that. Are you able to afford rent? Instead of that, try, what challenges have you faced in securing stable housing? Did you ever live on your own before? Instead of that, try, what was your past housing situation like and what worked well for you? And lastly, would you be open to mediation with your landlord or a family member? Most people will say no. Whereas if you ask, what options have you considered to improve your housing situation? Makes them think a little bit more and dive a little bit deeper. All right. Next slide, please, Jody. Oh, we're at our end. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, I guess we can share. I don't know if you all would like to share. I would like to open it up for individuals who are in the audience to be able to share any stories or any maybe motivational interviewing skills that they've used that wasn't listed, if you all are comfortable. Let me bring my chat box up. That might help. I'll work this. Anyone want to share? Oh, I see Allison. I don't know if your hand has been up the whole time. Is Allison okay sharing? Let me find Allison. Allison, are you able to unmute?
Yes.
There you go. Were you open to sharing? I saw your hand up.
Nope.
Oh,
I
no.
didn't have anything to share. It was a mistake.
Oh, okay. Okay. No worries. Okay. Well, did anyone want to share, or maybe we can jump into maybe I can bring up a time or something. Let's
Yeah,
see.
there's I like what Kathy shared here. I always ask my clients permission to ask some deep questions.
Okay.
And yeah, it says, is it okay if I ask you about? That's a wonderful lead-in, and that's actually a very trauma-informed practice of consent. So well done, Kathy. I celebrate you.
Are you able to see the chat, Jody? Maybe better than I
I
can.
Yeah, I am. And the chat right now, there, thanks, Bo. 10 out of 10 presentation. We'll take it. Even with all of our technical challenges today. We
We
appreciate that.
you.
Yeah. I don't see questions.
There is a question. There's a comment in the chat, Jody, from
Yeah.
I think it could be uplifted. It is by Bancoy Diamond.
I believe that you listen and understanding that many people in the situation are embarrassed, and patience allowing them time to open completely up about their disposition.
that
Yes.
that Banco.
Yes. Well said. Thank you.
Do you have anything else you wanted to share?
There's a question here by Joy. With the housing shortage, how do you handle when someone is coming in with the trauma of not being helped? How do you address the wait times? That's a great question, Joy. Manisha, can you hear me?
You broke up just a little bit. Sorry, Jody. Can you say it again? I was trying to
That's
find
okay. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna hit answer live and maybe you can see it that way. It's from Joy.
Okay.
Yeah. Kimberly, great comment. I believe listening and hearing from both sides are important. All right. Monisha, can you hear me okay? I'll try and
Yeah.
read the question again.
Okay.
All right. This question is from Joy. With the housing shortage, how do you handle when someone is coming in with the trauma of not being helped? How do you address the wait times?
That's a very difficult one. Especially when the client already feels as though, and I hate to use this lingo, but I hear it all the time when clients say, I'm tired of you guys playing games with my life. And did you have something, Daryl?
Yes, I can kind of feel that question. That's something that we go over in housing problem solving with open-ended questions and motivational interviewing as well. We What we train to do in that instance is only offer what we can offer. Taking someone that comes in and is interviewing that day, that because that question gets asked a lot. One of the first things we like to do before even doing any interviewing and is asking permission, like someone said in the chat, and asking, is it a good time to even have that conversation? With that being said, we go on to ask, well, have you showered today? Have you eaten today? Taking care of the basic necessities, it doesn't fill the gap of, how long this will take. So what we have been trained to do is offer what we can. Do you need a bus pass? Can I offer you a shower? Because unfortunately the funds aren't there to expedite everyone out of their situation, although we would like to, but we can only offer what we can, and that's what we train.
I would like to say one thing too. One thing that I used to like to, I guess a technique that I used to like to use with my clients was transparency and honesty. Because when you go in and just some providers will go in and say, okay, I'm going to get you housed, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But realistically, there is a possibility that that client may be waiting quite some time for housing. And there is a possibility that they may not be able to get the housing that you are trying to get for them, just because there isn't enough demand to meet the amount of people that are here or that are experiencing homelessness. So I always say being transparent and honest with your client and letting them know that no matter what, I'm here and I'm going to help support you through this. So whether I house you tomorrow or whether I house you within the next year, I am going to be here with you through this. And sometimes that alone helps, but I always recommend being honest and upfront with a client, because once you say something, they're going to hold you to that. And once you don't deliver, that's when you've lost them. You've lost them again, because now you're someone else who has promised them something and didn't deliver. So that's something that I would like to add on top of what Daryl said.
I totally agree with that, Monisha.
These are excellent. Monisha, can I add elevate two other questions?
Yeah, maybe you can read them because I can't see them. Sorry, Jody.
Yeah, no worries at all. No, I'm going to read them out loud.
Okay.
So Kathy said to Joy, acknowledge the wait times are long. However, here's what we can do to help speed up the process. For example, let's work on employment. Let's take a look at your credit, etc. Empowering them to take action and not wait on the system to help you.
Love
Yeah.
that, Kathy.
Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you, Kathy. And Kimberly has a great question. How do we motivate the client to show up for themselves in being document ready?
That's part of one of the things that you can offer in the interim of them getting housing, because not only can you offer it to them, it's a requirement, but accomplishing little goals for each client will motivate them to be a part of the process.
I always go back to transparency, and again, letting a client know the process that it takes in order to get them housed and the process that it takes in order for these referrals to go through. Transparency can help a client not only understand you and your position as a provider, but can also help them understand why it's taking so long and why these documents are needed. Because sometimes you got to remember these clients are vulnerable. So to be asking for disability certs and having people sign this, and a lot of people are extremely private. So they don't understand, why do you need me to get a disability cert? Why do you need me to have a third party representative tell me that, or tell you that I'm experiencing homelessness when you see that I'm experiencing homelessness? So explaining to them why these forms are needed, what we're using them for, and how they're not going to be used against them in their personal life. This is more for housing, and this is needed to help you with your housing. It's not going to affect anything else that you have or that you're trying to line up in life. And again, that's why I always say transparency, 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 because once you're honest and upfront with them and you explain the process and they can understand it, it helps them to want to motivate themselves, because now they feel like they're involved. Somebody tell you, hey, I need you to do this. Well, why? That's how I am. I need to know, why do you want me to do that, so that I can understand the importance of it. But if you're just coming in saying, I need you to sign this form, what is that form for? And why am I signing it? So I think that them knowing and being involved in their process will also help motivate them to want to get housed and want to do the other things that are needed. And yes, I saw Taylor say transparency and honesty build relationships. Very, very much so.
That they do. And if I could just add very quickly, there is always that trust aspect from a person that is experiencing homelessness. I know that I was asked to go get papers and have this signed, and a host of other things that was suggested to me. And my first question was why, right? I had just came out of being involved with the legal system. So I thought that everything would be reported back. And I thought that some of these things that you were asking me to do would be hurtful to me. So I building that trust and that rapport and that transparency and open and honesty is huge.
Yes. And I always say, I know that there is a level of professionalism that we have to keep with clients, but something that has never failed me is treating my clients like they are family. If I'm not going to speak to someone that I have a personal relationship with the same way that I am a stranger. So I try not to speak to clients in a stranger way, because if that's the case, that energy, they're feeling that. Like, you're not really, you don't care about me. I'm just another roster or another name on your list. But once you try to build and let them know, I care about you and I care about the situation that you're in, it I'm telling you, it can open up amazing, amazing paths for you and your clients together.
Thank you so much, Monisha. That was like, what a beautiful way to wrap up conversational case management. Daryl, thank you as well. And for those that want to continue the housing problem solving conversation and learning, again, that happens quarterly. And please keep an eye on your email for the upcoming dates in June, September, and November. We are going to take a 5-minute break, and we will be back at 2 o'clock. Oh, the time just changed. We'll be back at 2:01 for our implicit bias training, and hopefully no more technical issues, but we seem to be doing just fine. So we will pause the training and we will see you back at 2:01. Thank you so much.
Uh-oh, Jody, I see boxes.
You do?
Do.
I have no idea what's going on. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll try again. About now.
Where? I wonder what you did last time. Get them.
Can you see the screen okay, Ty?
Oh, I can see it. I can also see the boxes.
Are you talking about...
It's, I sent you a screenshot in Teams, which should give you an idea of what it looks like. It kind of blocks, it would be fine, but it does block some of the content, which, you know, I want to make sure is available for folks.
Sure. All right, well, we're mid-training, so I haven't changed any of my processes. I'm not really sure how to troubleshoot this, but I would love to move forward and carry on.
Not sure what you did last time, Jody, but whatever you did, they went away immediately.
Yeah, I did the same exact thing I just did, Daryl. I stopped sharing and then I reshared again.
Well, like you said, zooming.
Zoom is zooming for sure. I'm going to stop share. I get to see your wonderful faces and I'm going to share again. So here we are. This might just be how we get to move through our implicit bias training, which is now. So we're going ahead and going to get started with our implicit bias training and appreciate everyone's patience with Zoom's technical challenges today. I would say if this was my first rodeo, I would totally take responsibility. But we've been here together in our training space like this for the last year, so we'll carry on. I am excited to introduce Taifani Wedding Okan to move us through the implicit bias training work, and I'll allow her to introduce herself. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. We can go to the next slide. Before I proceed, I just want to say thank you all for being here. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I do have to say, Jody did an amazing job making this training beautiful and engaging. So hopefully the slides start acting right at some point because, yeah, Jody put in a lot of work and I really wanted y'all to see the slides. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, which it will do like a quick introduction of what we're doing today. And these look okay. All right. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's the transition content. I'm not sure. But as Jody said, sorry, my laptop's about to die. Okay, so as Jody said, my name is Taifani Wedding Okan, and I'm so excited to be here. Congratulations on completing your conversational case management training. You've really fortified your understanding of motivational interviewing techniques and applying housing problem solving strategies, which is a great segue into our training today on implicit bias. This training is designed to help all CAS assessors like yourself to better understand, identify, and address implicit bias in your professional roles. So today, together, we're going to explore the impact of implicit bias. We're going to work to develop awareness of our own biases, and acquire practical strategies to foster equitable decision-making and inclusive practices within the homelessness response system. By integrating this knowledge, our goal is that you as assessors will have the opportunity to enhance your ability to provide equitable and effective services to diverse communities. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Well, at least our pictures are still there. So I'll do another introduction just to kind of give you a little background on who I am at Sacramento Steps Forward. My name again is Taifani Wedding Okon, and I'm the Racial Equity Project Director. I have worked within direct services and program and policy implementation for nearly 10 years. And in that time, I've really witnessed and learned a lot about implicit bias and the impact on decision making. So with that, I'm really excited to share some of what I've learned over the years. And I also just want to say that as much as I know you all are coming here to learn and have something to take away, I hope the same for myself. I recognize that I am one of many professionals on this call that have a real knowledge of implicit bias. So when there's an opportunity, I invite you to participate in the polls, join the chat, come off mute when we can, and really just share, anything you've learned along the way. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kelly to do her intro, and then we'll do a land acknowledgement and a labor acknowledgement. Go ahead, Kelly. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can.
That technology is working today. That's good.
Good. We got something going.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Castro. I am a partner with Live Expertise Specialist at Sacramento Steps Forward. I also have quite a few years under my belt working within homeless services. I am very thankful to be here with all of you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. So Kelly and I work really closely together on various projects, so I thought it would be great to invite her here to help me read the acknowledgements. I'm going to start with the land acknowledgement first, so we can go to the next slide. And let me zoom in so I can read it. All right, so for our land acknowledgement, I'm going to just go ahead and read it, and then I'll share a little bit about why we do land acknowledgements. So we'll start. We wish to acknowledge the Sacramento is the homeland of the Southern Maidu, Valley and Plains Miwok, and the Nisenan people, the Patwin Wintun people, and the members of the Wilton Rancheria tribes who have inhabited this landscape since time immemorial. We extend our gratitude to the ancestors of all California Native American tribes and their descendants as we recognize that wherever we are joining from in our virtual community, we are all on California Native American land. We recognize the systemic inequities created by the negative impacts of colonialization, past and present. We stand committed to dismantle ongoing legacies of oppression that have dispossessed California Native Americans of their land and denied their rights to self-determination. And this land acknowledgement was written by the Wilton Rancheria tribe. And just to provide some context, we use land acknowledgements to really ground the space that we're in and to help guide conversations and actions we take. And so we like to start our meetings, especially within the racial equity work and within other spaces within Sacramento Steps Forward, to really make sure we're focused on the goal, right? If you're not aware of the land in which you are situated on, I'm going to provide a link in the chat where you can actually type in your address and it'll provide you with some information. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Kelly to read our labor acknowledgement. We can go to, oh, we're good.
All right. Thank you, Ty. Can you hear me again?
I can.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. We recognize that the United States, as we know it, was built on the often fatal expense of forcefully enslaved Black people. We must acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, including the culture, economic growth, and development, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Black Africans and their descendants who suffered the horrors of the transatlantic trafficking, chattel slavery, and later on dehumanization through segregation and Jim Crow laws. We acknowledge and remember those who did not survive the Middle Passage, those who were beaten and lynched at the hands of colonizers, those who are still suffering while fighting for their freedom. We remember those who toiled the ground where many structures have been built and resurrected. We are indebted to their labor and their unwilling sacrifice, and we must acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact and the generational trauma that is still felt and witnessed today.
Thank you, Kelly. So for me, a labor acknowledgement is actually a relatively new practice for me. I've been aware of like the land acknowledgement, but the labor acknowledgement is something new that was implemented by our racial equity committee. And I just appreciate it. And thank you, Kelly, for taking the time to read it. Just as a reminder for the labor acknowledgement, it's a statement that helps recognize much of the economic progress and the development in a geographic area or industry, which resulted from the unpaid labor and forced servitude of people of color. So in the same way that we want to center the space with land acknowledgement, a labor acknowledgement is a great practice. I see some great feedback already in the chat that folks would like you know, to receive copies of this, and Jody will make sure that happens. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started. Our opening thoughts, let's get into it. I'm really excited to be here in community with you all. Just to preface things, I did a run through of our training today, and I was a little over time, so if I'm talking fast here or there, just drop in the chat and let me know, and I'll try to slow things down. I'm just really excited, and I have a lot of information that I want to share. I know there's still black boxes popping up, but for the sake of everyone's time, we want to be respectful. We're going to continue, and we will send you the slides that don't have the black boxes so you can see the beautiful presentation. So in a word or two, I would like to actually invite you all to utilize the chat feature to share what your thoughts and feelings are as we enter this space. I will read off what you all share, so please don't leave me hanging. What are your thoughts and feelings as we enter this space? Empathy. Thank you, Tracy. Housing for all. Yes, absolutely. Ready to learn. Okay, Kyle. We are one. Open conversation. Yes. Gratitude for what we have. Yes, I've been practicing a lot of gratitude lately. Thankful, excited, open-minded. That's important, especially for an implicit bias training. Ooh, okay, I can't keep up now. A people problem more so than a housing problem. Definitely grateful, blessed, non-judgmental. Everyone deserves another chance to get their life back on track. And being open. That's great. Solution oriented. I'll take a few more. Accountability and responsibility to our community members. Thank you. I see a book was dropped in the chat. I'd be curious to hear more about that. Hope in housing and simple compassion. Absolutely. Well, thank you all for sharing. I really appreciate it. As I mentioned, I'm really thankful to have you all join this space. The work that each of you do every day is so important, even now more than ever. I want to acknowledge that discussing implicit bias and racism is likely to bring up a lot of emotion. Even for me, just bringing up the land acknowledgement and the labor acknowledgement, that brought up emotion for me in that moment. So I just want to invite you all to take space as you need it. And we'll go ahead and move on to our poll. So The question we have is how many types of bias are you aware of, such as implicit, explicit, confirmation, etc.? None. Okay. Jody, can we share the results or should I just read them out?
Let's give folks a little bit longer to respond. We've got about 8 responses.
Thanks, Jody. Got excited. The poll disappeared. The poll didn't pop up.
This is great.
Party. Okay.
Loving that. So why don't we just move along?
Okay. It disappeared fast. Well, okay, so from the 8 that were able to respond, it looks like we've got 12, some folks that believe that there are 12 or more bias types. We've got a couple responses that believe there are more than 5 and then more than 3. I'm glad that no one said there are none, so that's great. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide, Jody. All right, so we can actually move on one more time to the, yeah, okay. Oh, okay, so you won't be able to see all of the different types of implicit bias here. Jody created this amazing infographic that lists out, different types of bias, not just implicit bias. And I thought it was pretty interesting because there are so many different types of bias that affect our everyday life. For example, some that I wasn't really aware of was like, let's see, beauty bias, so judging people based on physical attractiveness. Stereotyping, I knew what stereotyping was, but at one point I hadn't really considered it a bias. So this one was interesting for me. And then like anchoring bias, which is the tendency where a specific piece of information is relied upon to make a decision. For example, considering only articulation skills as part of a communication and ignoring listening skills. Or the value attribution, you can't see that when it's in the bottom right corner, but that's the tendency to assign higher value to certain qualities or traits. For example, to favor extroversion over introversion, which is interesting. A little fun fact about me, I'm actually an introvert. So I like to create the trainings. I don't necessarily like to present them, but when I'm interacting with folks, I enjoy that. So glad to be here with you all. And the one that we're all here for, right? Implicit bias, the tendency to weigh the latest data more heavily than older data occurs commonly during performance appraisals and reviews. And this is more focused on like assessments as it relates to, work, but it's just a great example of all the different types of bias that exist in addition to implicit bias. Before we proceed, I do see a couple of hands raised, and I want to make sure that you have what you need before we continue. Those that have their hands up, would you like to send a message to us and we can try to respond to you? Want to make sure that you have what you need and that you can hear us and everything. Let's see. You have a request to post the bias link in the chat. Thank you, Indiana. Okay. All right, so we'll move on and I will rely on my fellow panelists to help with responding to some of the questions. So we're going to focus on unconscious or implicit bias for the purposes of this training. I have a quick video that kind of provides a great description of how implicit bias operates because we all make unconscious decisions based on various categories within milliseconds. So we can go ahead and play this video to kind of talk about that.
Our unconscious can process vast amounts of information much more quickly than our conscious mind. Part of the way it does this is via shortcuts. Without knowing it, we use our personal background, cultural environment, and previous experiences to make almost instantaneous decisions. This can lead to problems, especially in matters where we should use rational, unbiased thinking. Our unconscious can be fallible. We can make snap decisions about people, categorizing them according to gender, race, age, sexuality, and other characteristics. Within milliseconds, we judge if someone is like us and belongs to our in-group. These are the people we may favor. Unconscious bias can have an impact on our decisions without us even realizing it. Research shows that if I were a man, you would be more likely to be nodding along to this animation. We trust male voices more than female voices. We can mitigate the impact of unconscious bias on our decision-making by raising our awareness of it and addressing our own biases proactively.
Thanks, Jody. So we'll talk a little bit more about addressing our own implicit biases proactively later in the training, but I wanted to share that because it gives a great visual of like how quickly we process information and how that information basically helps us make unconscious decisions, right? And it's not necessarily just focused on race. For the purposes of this training, we're going to focus on how race and racism impact our decision making and focus on implicit bias. But implicit bias, it's important to know that race is one of many of the factors that impact our decision making. We'll go ahead and move on to the next
Our
slide.
unconscious can process vast amounts.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about implicit bias just to make sure we have a shared understanding. So implicit bias is a term used to refer to attitudes, stereotypes, and beliefs that can affect how we treat others. Implicit bias is not intentional, but it impacts how we judge others based on factors such as race, ability, gender, culture, language. These mental associations are automatically evoked based on our own experience, beliefs, and interactions with the world. And spoiler alert, we all have implicit bias. Some of us may be more adept at identifying when our unconscious is overriding, but we all have implicit bias. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. We're good on time so far. That's good. Okay, so as I mentioned, today's training is going to focus on implicit bias as it relates to racism. So I provided this slide here, which really kind of breaks down different types of racism that are experienced. So we know that systemic racism has played a significant role in why Black, Indigenous, and people of color are disproportionately impacted by homelessness. Really, each type of racism listed here has contributed to such housing disparities. Systemic racism, though, is defined as a more focused discrimination or unequal treatment on the basis of membership in a particular ethnic group, typically one that is of minority or marginalized. And this typically arises from systems, structures, and expectations that have become established within society or an institution. So because of that, kind of what we talked about here, I want to share a video with you titled "A Conversation with Native Americans on Race." This video is about 6 minutes, and it captures the reflections and thoughts and feelings of the impact of racism within their community and their everyday life. After we watch that, we'll kind of open up the floor to kind of share our thoughts on the video, and then we will proceed to talking about how to identify any impacts of implicit bias within the work that we're doing. So Jody, you can go ahead and go to our next video. Be quiet for a minute.
There's DIY, and there's doing it yourself.
Apache. But really that's the government's name because they can't say Zithikai in there.
They will tell me how awesome they think it is that I've decided to be a part of my culture. And it's funny to me, it like hits me really weird and I don't like it. And I didn't know why at first, but it's because I haven't decided to be a part of my culture. I live it every day.
I'm more comfortable with the term Native, divorced from Native American. I know there are people who use Indigenous, and if there is one term I do not like to be called is American Indian.
And for me, to be Indigenous is to have an intimate and interconnected relationship to a homeland.
And so that's really important because land is, tied to every aspect of who we are.
Being Native in a city is almost a daily reminder of your people's erasure, of the fact that people don't even remember that you're here and that you exist.
But what I did encounter was just this preconceived notion that all Native Americans are dead.
I've had older white men come up to me and say, oh man, if this was 40 years ago, I can just do whatever I wanted to.
The cattle outside doing the work and the dog inside the house, those are property. Those are the black folks in America. They're our property to white men. Then the exotic antelope on the wall, or the exotic, that's the native, that's how natives are perceived in America.
We're treated like animals. They monitor our blood quantum. We're the only, besides dogs and horses, I don't know of any other animal that they monitor the blood quantum.
The way I explain it to people is like, imagine a pizza with different slices and let's say 32 slices. Of the 32 slices, I'm 28 Apache. That's my particular blood quantum. And Native Americans in the US are the only minority group who have to prove their nativeness on an Indian card.
It's used to divide Native people against each other because it can be used as a way to say, I am more Native than you. And I was a part of that too. I used my 4/4 to kind of make myself feel better against other people.
The one drop rule, meaning that, one drop of black blood makes you black, that was to keep as many people oppressed or, legitimize their oppression as possible. But on the other side, one drop of anything else completely dilutes you as a Native person. So if you're a Native person, you have a one drop of something else, then suddenly you're less Native. So it's the opposite.
Traditionally, within the Apache society, you go by the mother. And if the mother's recognized as Apache, she has her clan, the children are unquestionably Apache. Not in the American context, not when patriarchy trumps matriarchy. So what does that mean? My sisters are short 1/16 of a degree. What does that mean? Does that mean their pinkies aren't Apache? What does that mean?
Being a mixed race person is a whole another side of it, but that's a very common experience in our tribe. So it's not as if we're unusual in that way. What is unusual is the admixture of black.
My grandfather actually doesn't want people, if he hears that somebody from the tribe is coming over, he won't come out of his room because he doesn't want them to know that he's that complexion that he doesn't want me to be affiliated with having African American blood, but I say it. It's not going to change anything.
If it were up to the American government, natives wouldn't be around because after a certain time, that blood will dilute. It will go out. And so if there's no native peoples to provide benefits, then we're not obligated to meet these treaty rights. And if we're not obligated to meet these treaty contracts, then the land is available. The resources are available.
And I think that essential point about our claim to sovereignty, our claim to land, claim to a culture, our claim to resources is one that gets lost if we don't insist upon the fact that we are nations.
And we have taken huge steps to decolonizing, and that proof comes from people being able to have the opportunities to speak their language, to be on their ancestral land.
But the thing with decolonization is that it's an ongoing process, just like grieving, just like any loss.
As much as possible now, I try to tell people that I have a Native American name, and maybe it doesn't mean anything to you, but it means everything to me. My name maybe doesn't have a romanticized Hollywood Indian name, but my name has more meaning than that. My name means that my family survived. My family survived disease. My family survived Catholicism. My family survived settler colonialism, and my family, they survived. I survived. My existence is resistance. Me saying my name is Skiam Tulks, that is resistance in and of itself.
Thank you, Jody. So I want to give folks a moment. The first couple of times I watched that, it was definitely emotional for me. And so I want to give folks a moment. If you want to react, I see some reactions already, but if you'd like to react, you can. If you'd like to raise your hand to be let off of mute to kind of share your thoughts, welcome you to share how you're feeling in whatever capacity you'd like. If you want to send a chat, you can do that. I love seeing all the hearts. Janet says very good information. Tammy, quite impactful. Ben Hua, very nice. Never considered this. Tell me if I pronounce your name right. I'm curious to know. Paulette, this was awesome. Hey, Keon, voice and first experience storytelling is important. Yes. Tom, eye-opening. Very profound. Oh, Francois with a V. Thank you. Francois. Okay, got it. I asked that because my name is Typhani and people call me Tiffany a lot. So I like to try to get names right when I can, every time. Painfully insightful. Yes, thank you. Jody, do we have any hands raised that we want to allow folks to come off mute to share? Or looks like we've got a lot of engagement in the chat and using the reaction feature, which I appreciate.
I am taking a quick look and will most likely create more black boxes on the screen.
It's okay.
Yeah. I don't see any hands at the moment.
Okay. Well, thank you all again for participating in the chat. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the reactions. We'll go ahead and move on to the next part. We are coming up short on time, so you might hear speedy Ty, but like I said, if you need me to slow down or repeat anything, let one of the panelists know and I'll try to go back, but I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. Okay, so recognizing implicit bias. So we know that the consequences of implicit bias within housing are both powerful and measurable and lead to inequitable and disparate outcomes for people of color. We know that implicit bias is a reflection of systemic racism, which we discussed in previous slides. So now we're going to look at some of these CAS assessments to kind of talk through them and reflect on how implicit bias might show up in those spaces. We can go to the next slide, Jody. Okay, so just so you all know, I am not a guru in anything related to CAS assessments. My focus in the work that I do is really looking at racial equity. And so I'm learning about the CAS assessment process. So if questions specific to the functionality of any of the assessments comes up, we'll have to defer to the CAS team. But if you have questions, please feel free to reach out, and Jody will make sure that I'll make sure that you get connected to who you need to. But I wanted to pull up these slides to kind of look through some of the assessments together. So some that we'll look at, thank you, you can leave it there, Jody. Some of the assessments we'll look at are the current living situation, the housing conversation tool, and the individualized support plan. And we're literally just gonna kind of browse it. So let's look at this first slide. So we see we have a snapshot of the housing conversation tool. And there's a lot of questions we have to ask. You know, how many children are in a household? Does someone have custody of their children? Were any of the adults 18 to 24 in the household enrolled in foster care? Monthly income? A lot of detailed questions. Let's move on to the next slide. All right, so some other questions we have. Do you have a housing voucher dedicated to rental subsidy that will last for at least 1 year? Do you have 2 to 3 trusted contacts you can list? Has having poor credit or no credit rental history prevented you from obtaining permanent housing, and so on and so on. So we're digging deep in these assessments, right? And I know that that's really to ensure we have all of the pertinent information we need to identify the most appropriate resources for our clients. But given some of the things that we talked about, even in our conversational management training, like imagine from the perspective of the client. They're sitting in the room, they're going through this process with you, and let's say you're employing all of the great conversational case management techniques that you just learned, some that you already have, and your implicit bias starts, you know, your shortcuts start moving, right? You're starting to make snap judgments that maybe you're not aware of. Do you think that a client might notice that? And I know we don't have a poll for that, but give me a thumbs up if you think you're interacting with the client and doing a housing conversation, the housing conversation tool, that clients might notice if implicit bias is coming up. I see a lot of thumbs up. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We can go to the next one, Jody. Sorry about that. All right, so we can see that there are a significant amount of questions that we must be able to get through with the client. We all agree that if we're asking all these questions, our brain is already going to start moving faster and trying to take those shortcuts, and that implicit bias can start coming up. And guess what? With each question that we ask and each question that a client answers, like I mentioned, our brain is likely to start making those shortcuts and implicit bias is activated. So in this case, although a client provides you with an answer to a question, you may mistakenly select the wrong thing. This example that I'm going to provide you is a little bit different, but like for me, sometimes in situations, you know, like when you're moving really quick, for me, I have 2 children, and sometimes my son, my 13-year-old, will like ask me a question and I'm in the middle of like multitasking or working like I am now. And I might answer it incorrectly. Like he'll might be like, hey, can I get DoorDash? And I'm like, yes. And then I continue working. And then after the meeting, you know, or my work, I'm like, when did you get DoorDash? And he's like, you said I can get DoorDash. It's like my brain did its own shortcut so that my son wasn't like fussing at me about food or whatever, you know? So that was a very innocuous like example, but just imagine like your brain doing those types of shortcuts in situations like this, where every answer, you know, ensuring that accuracy counts. So one of the ways that you can, you know, one of the ways that implicit bias really impacts the assessment process is, you know, you're running through this, you're trying to get stuff done. Let's say you're busy. Let's say you had a you know, a heavy case earlier and your brain is just tired. So trying to make sure that you answer the questions that the clients are providing you with, or indicating them correctly, is a big thing. The other thing is making sure that your implicit bias isn't activating and judgment isn't showing itself when you're asking these questions, because when you're asking questions and there's judgment, or a client can feel that you're being judgmental or maybe biased, they may not want to answer the questions accurately. They may not feel safe answering the questions accurately. So yeah, it's likely that we can make mistakes in how we process information. And so we just want to try to be mindful of that. We can go on to the next slide. Okay, so same thing here, just another example. So with the individualized service plan, I know we just discussed how implicit bias might impact our accuracy of completing assessments. Like I mentioned, we also want to be aware of how implicit bias might impact how we interact with clients. We know, for example, that the ISP is a more client-led assessment where we provide like support where needed, but our implicit bias can creep up in these spaces as well. We might make assumptions about what support they want or need and not realize that implicit bias is creating blind spots or barriers to clients receiving the services that they need. Jody, you can go on to the next slide. Okay, so same thing, really hitting that point home, but yeah, if we don't keep our implicit bias in check throughout these assessments and our interactions with clients, it's likely that we, can also have reduced empathy and compassion. We know that implicit bias can just decrease empathy and compassion towards homeless individuals, especially. Caseworkers may be less likely to listen attentively or understand the unique circumstances of clients or advocate as strongly for their needs. And also, we often might end up treating clients differently. So we know biases can lead to differential treatment where CAS assessors unconsciously provide less support, fewer resources, or less engagement, or less time with individuals they perceive negatively. And this, we know, creates barriers. So those are some things I just wanted to share with just the assessment process, because sometimes we think that, oh, we're doing an assessment, like, they're infallible, but they, we're human and we're using the assessment. So we have to be aware of like the functionality and how we're gathering the data and information from clients. Before I proceed, does any of my co-panelists want to add anything? If you do, feel free to share. If not, I'm gonna move on in a second.
I would like to add one thing.
Yes, please do.
That as far as implicit bias, or and sometimes that bias can come with dealing with difficult client that is experiencing homelessness. And I know that we have a portion in the housing problem solving training where we suggest that if a client is a little more difficult than you can deal with, or is hitting a little too close to home, to reach out to another facilitator, coworker, someone in your organization, and don't feel like you have to deal with that in order to just get somebody else that may be able to facilitate a better conversation. And recognizing, like you said, when that implicit bias comes up, because sometimes it can just come up in the case of dealing with someone who's having a difficult time out there and they're giving that to you. So, yeah.
Thank you, Daryl. Yeah, that makes me think about, so back when I was a case manager, I recall working with one of my coworkers, and we went out and we did some outreach to some clients, and we had a client that was, to your point, Daryl, like just not in a good place, right? Not in a good place, very distrusting. And after we did our outreach, we came back to our office, and I remember my coworker, doing her case notes, and she just put client declined services. And then in my head, I'm like, well, the client didn't really decline services. So we kind of talked about it. And I remember that advocate kind of sharing, well, it didn't seem like she wanted to work with, that client wanted to work with me, right? And I'm like, no, I think you need to take some more time to build rapport. Maybe there's some basic needs that aren't met. Maybe they just have gone through something challenging, but your assumption, just because of the way they spoke to you or the way they were interacting or anything, like you made an assumption that they didn't want services, and that could really impact them negatively later, right? Because the next caseworker goes and they see, oh, this client declined services, they don't want services. So that door closes, like, you know what I'm saying? So thank you, Daryl, I appreciate that.
Someone put in the chat, taking things personally always ends bad. I don't want to misquote. It said it's almost always a waste of time to take things personally. And I totally agree with that, even though it's kind of difficult. But thank you.
Oh yeah, I agree. Thank you. Okay. Well, we can move on to implementing some strategies. We have a few minutes left, and I really want to have some time to hear from you all to come off mute. So I'm going to try to speed things up a little bit. So we know that the consequences of implicit bias within housing are both powerful and measurable and lead to inequitable and disparate outcomes for people of color. As you can see here, this is just a great example of like just how the data speaks for the impacts of implicit bias and systemic racism. So the first column on the left, we have a list of 2024 enrollments from 211, CAS, shelters, and PSAPs, which is the problem solving access points. And the different races that we have here that have enrolled, you know, we have American Indian, Alaskan Native, or Indigenous, Asian or Asian American, Black and African American, Hispanic, Middle Eastern, Native, white, multiracial, etc. Then we see the number of clients in the next column. Then we see the percentage of clients enrolled. And then we have the percentage in Sacramento County. So for example, we have Black and African American enrollments highlighted because for 2024 enrollments, we had 5,296 clients, which represents over 40% of enrollments. But if you notice here, we as Black and African American folks only make up 9% of Sacramento County's demographic population. So that's over a 31% disparate outcome. And why do y'all think that is? I know we talked about it. A lot of it is systemic racism, barriers to accessing services, and a whole bunch of other stuff, right? So I thought it was helpful because this data shows why, for example, we needed to have this training and have this conversation. And just a reminder, all of this, these are numbers here, but we're talking about people, we're talking about families, right? So I just want you all to remember that. So awareness of implicit bias and how you interact with clients is really imperative to success and successful service provision for clients. It's also important to know that we as CAS assessors may do the work necessary to be aware of our implicit bias, but you know, our clients are still navigating through a world where racism and implicit bias impacts them at every step of the way. So maybe you are really good at spotting, you know, your implicit bias and you are able to kind of like manage that, but also recognize that when they're navigating through these systems and they're navigating through services, that may not be the case everywhere they go. So with that, I want to share another video with you. Hopefully this uplifts things a little bit more. This video really, left me happy, but I'll let you see it first. Go ahead.
A society can be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members. Look around. As a nation, who does America allow to become homeless? And what does that say about us? Black and Native Americans are disproportionately impacted by homelessness. It is no accident. For generations, people of color have been denied access to everything at the heart of a just and fair society, including a place to call home. People burdened most by these inequities are more likely to be met by a punitive system instead of a social safety net. And when they do become homeless, the systems that respond to homelessness often do a better job of supporting people who are white than those who are not. Homelessness is a mirror. It reflects our nation's living history of racism. It also reflects the stark reality that these are life and death issues. But ending homelessness would reveal something else that is also true. We can create a future where a place to call home is within reach for all, and the impact of racism is truly a thing of the past. We can deliver on the promise of the United States as a just and equitable nation. Our decisions created this crisis. We have the power to create something new, something better, something just. Join us.
I hope that made y'all smile like it made me smile. Can we go to the next slide, please? I just love this part. So we have the power to create something new, something better, and something just, right? So one of my colleagues, Kai, offered a training last month, which I'm sure many of you, excuse me, if not all of you were present for. And they stated, without CAS assessors, there is no coordinated access system for clients. That really stuck with me because as a previous direct service practitioner, I remember having those days where I felt effective. I felt like I made a difference in a client's life in some way. But I also remember those days that I felt like powerless. I felt defeated. I felt like the systems were designed just obviously to help create barriers for people of color, especially, or for survivors, because at the time I worked to help support survivors of trafficking. And so this right here just reminded me that like each of us that are here for these trainings, that become CAS assessors, that yes, that put things in place to help support clients, we have the power to make a difference. Yes, and someone put in the chat, Derek, redlining today. I think that's an important topic as well. So thank you for bringing that up. We know that redlining has also created situations where, people of color, don't have housing, don't have access to purchasing houses. My grandmother actually, purchased her house in Curtis Park, and she purchased that house over 20 years ago, but there was something on the deed. I think she told me the story, but there was something on the deed that said cannot sell to a person of color, right? And I just remember those types of things really like lingering when I think about that. So I appreciate you sharing that, Derek, about redlining. And maybe, when we have an opportunity to come off mute, you can talk a little bit more about it. But yeah, so here are some additional steps we can take. I'm going to try to run through these really quickly. We can go to the next slide. So, of course, understanding influences of your own culture and background, working to acquire knowledge and skills, engage in self-assessment, and try to outsmart implicit bias through awareness. I know I talked about that a lot. So next slide, thank you. So here are some ways we can do that. So as I said, understanding influences of your own culture and background, focus on being aware of your worldview because that influences the perception of various cultures. Be aware of your professional and organizational culture, which influences the policies and practices that you have within your programs, and work to understand your own cultural influences and communication styles and how they impact others that you work with. Next one. Acquire knowledge and skills. So develop personal learning goals and objectives that enhance your cultural competence. We could do a whole training on cultural competency, which we probably should. Prioritize evidence-based practices that are centered on racially, ethnically, and culturally diverse populations. Acquire effective approaches to engage culturally diverse communities, including those affected by historical trauma, discrimination, and marginalization. And then the next slide, engage in self-assessment. Some questions you can ask yourself is, what is your comfort level working with clients of different nationalities or socioeconomic backgrounds as you? What is your dominant culture within your organization and how might that culture impact staff and clients? And then ask yourself, do you seek perspectives from people with different cultural backgrounds than you? Some other questions that I wrote down include, when you walk into an appointment with someone of a differing background, do you feel tense? Do you feel scared? Do you feel excited? Do you feel comfortable? Be aware of those things. And yeah, If you don't feel comfortable, challenge yourself and ask yourself why. What could the potential benefit be if you did? And then here's a resource. So if you have your phone, you can take a picture take a picture of the QR code here. So this is the Implicit Bias Association test, which is widely used for assessing implicit bias. It measures the strength of associations between concepts and evaluations or stereotypes. This was founded in 1998 and it's still widely used. So it's a great resource if you want to start engaging in that self-assessment. And yeah, that's it. That's all I have for you all. I'm going to open up the mic now. So our closing thoughts are, what strategies would you like to share to combat implicit bias? I'll see if anybody has anything they'd like to share. If not, feel free to drop it in the chat. If I can remember how to find raised hands, that'd be great. Okay. We've got a couple people.
I have unmuted all of the
Thank you.
raised hands, or I've given them the allow. You're welcome to talk.
Thank you. Go ahead. Anybody want to share what your strategies are? And I see the QR code didn't work. I will fix that before we send out the training. I'm glad to see everyone's trying it though. That's great. Yes, I'll find another resource or I'll try to fix it so that folks can utilize it.
I believe my multicultural experience provides me a little bit different aspect when it comes to biases.
Yeah, it would. Everyone's bias is, everyone has different bias because of their experiences in their life. So no one's is going to be the same. That's a great point. Anybody else want to share? All right. Well, I really appreciate you all coming and engaging and responding. And I think that's all we have for today. I also want to thank Daryl for joining and hopping in to provide some additional context to this training, and Kelly and Jody for creating a beautiful training, which you all will be able to see soon. And yeah. What did I miss, Jody? I feel like there's something I
You
forgot.
got it. No, Ty, you got it. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
As a reminder, I will share with everyone February 26th is our final training in this CAS Assessor training series. That is Intro to Trauma-Informed Practices and better understanding vicarious trauma, how to recognize it, with some strategies also on how to prevent. So that's February 26th. You will be getting a thank you email within the next few days before the end of the week that will contain an edited recording so we don't get all the technical fun, and a copy of the slides with working links, and that will come before the end of the week as well. Thank you everyone for your patience, and please don't forget to fill out the exit survey and feel free to elevate all the technical challenges that you would like. And with that, I will also thank Monisha, Daryl, Ty, and of course Kelly as well.
I would like to thank you all for attending as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Jody, we have someone that in the chat that has some more specific technical questions. Is there an email that we can provide Jeffrey so that we can follow up with him? Do we have like an inbox for questions?
Ty, anything else?
In the chat, Tafani, I think she just dropped the trainings at sackstepsforward.org in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Jeffrey, can you email us at that link and we'll try to follow up with you? If you're still on here. Okay, got it. Thank you. Perfect. Can you put the survey? Someone says, can you put the exit survey in the chat? Keon, I see your hand raised. Are you able to come off mute?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, just in regards to, I forgot how you posed the question, but I want to add that mindfulness and humanity, right? Just compassion in itself, being mindful is always a great neutralizer to our biases. We just keep in mind, we have our differences, but we just be mindful that we are all human. Humanity alone is the number one neutralizer. We deal with bias.
Absolutely. I think that goes for, conversational case management. That goes for focusing on your implicit. That just goes for everything, honestly. Like when you interact with somebody, realize that they are human and provide that compassion. So I appreciate that. Thank you for joining.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Y'all did a great job too.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Jody, should I stop talking now?
Yes.
Okay.
We are all welcome to go. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye, everyone. Oh, I also wanted to put a plug really quick on attending our